There is a question that no motivational speaker will ever ask you from the stage. Not because they don't know the answer, but because the answer is uncomfortable. Because the answer dismantles the entire industry built around making you feel good for a few minutes before you go back to doing exactly what you were doing before. The question is this: if motivation truly worked, why are you still watching videos about it? Think about that for a moment. You have watched hundreds of videos. You have read the books. You have written the quotes on sticky notes and put them on your mirror. You have felt that fire in your chest, that surge of energy, that absolute certainty that tomorrow, everything will be different. And then tomorrow came. And it looked exactly like yesterday. This is not a story about motivation. This is a story about a young man named Ethan, who spent 3 years of his life chasing a feeling. And about the morning, one cold, quiet morning by a river, when he finally understood what he had been doing wrong. Ethan was 22 years old, and he had a dream so big, it frightened him. He wanted to build something. He wasn't sure exactly what: a business, a career, a life that meant something. He could feel the shape of it in his chest, this enormous thing waiting to be born. And every time he watched a video, every time a speaker's voice rose with passion, and the music swelled underneath, he could feel it pressing against his ribs, desperate to get out. So he watched more videos. He read more books. He filled notebook after notebook with plans: 6 hours of studying every day, waking up at 5 in the morning, running every evening, building something new every week. The plans were beautiful. The plans were detailed. The plans were, in their own way, a kind of art. He just never followed them. It always started well. Monday morning, fresh with the energy of a new beginning, Ethan would sit at his desk with his plan and his coffee and his absolute conviction that this time was different. And it was different for 2 days, sometimes 3. Then the feeling would begin to drain away, slowly at first, like water through sand, until one morning he woke up and the fire was simply gone, replaced by the familiar weight of a body that didn't want to move, and a mind that had already started negotiating. Just today, it whispered. Just today, you rest. You worked so hard these past few days. You deserve it. And so, he rested. And the day after that, he rested again. And soon the notebook was in the drawer, and the plans were just memories of a person he had almost been. 3 years of this. 3 years of starting and stopping, of fire and ash, of being so close to the person he wanted to be, and then watching that person disappear every time the feeling left him. He was beginning to wonder if that person had ever existed at all. His friend Ben was different in a way that Ethan found both admirable and quietly maddening. Ben was not extraordinary. He was not particularly talented or gifted or brilliant. He did not wake up every morning overflowing with passion for what he was doing. He had told Ethan this himself, sitting in the kitchen one evening over coffee, without any drama or false modesty. Most mornings, Ben said, I don't want to do it either. Then how do you do it? Ethan asked. Ben thought about this for a moment. I stopped asking myself how I feel, he said. I just go. Ethan stared at him. That's it? That's it. It sounded too simple. It sounded almost stupid. Ethan went home that night and wrote it in his notebook, and underlined it twice, and felt the familiar surge of excitement that told him everything was about to change. 2 days later, he was back to his old habits. Ben noticed. He always noticed. In that quiet way of his, without saying anything that felt like judgment. One morning, he appeared at Ethan's door before sunrise and said simply, Come with me. There's someone I want you to meet. The river in the early morning was a different world. The town was still sleeping. The sky was the color of deep water, just beginning to lighten at the edges, and the air had that particular quality of early morning that feels like the world is holding its breath before the day begins. Ethan pulled his jacket tighter and followed Ben along the bank until they reached an old man sitting on a low wooden stool, his fishing net folded neatly beside him, his eyes on the water, with the absolute patience of someone who has been doing the same thing for so long that patience is no longer an effort, but simply a condition of being. His name was Samuel. His hands were the hands of a man who had spent his life in physical work, thick-fingered, weathered, crossed, with small scars that had long since faded to white. But his eyes were clear and calm in a way that Ethan found unexpectedly moving, like looking at still water on a day with no wind. "He wants to know your secret," Ben said to Samuel. "He's been trying to change his life for 3 years, and he can't figure out why it isn't working." Samuel looked at Ethan for a long moment without speaking. Then he picked up his net and began to unfold it with slow, deliberate movements. "How long have you been coming here?" Ethan asked. 41 years, Samuel said. "Every morning, same time." Ethan looked around at the gray river, the cold air, the empty bank. "Even in winter, especially in winter," Samuel said, with something in his voice that was not quite a smile, but held the warmth of one. "The fish don't disappear because the weather is bad, and my family doesn't stop being hungry because I don't feel like getting out of bed." He cast the net in a long, practiced arc, and it fell across the water like a whisper. "Do you love fishing?" Ethan asked. Samuel considered this seriously, the way a man considers a question he has thought about many times. "Some mornings," he said. "Other mornings, it is cold and dark, and my back hurts, and there is nothing romantic about any of it." He paused. "But I come anyway." "Do you know why?" Ethan shook his head. "Because 41 years ago, I made a decision. Not a feeling. A decision. And I have been honoring that decision every morning since, regardless of how I feel about it." He turned to look at Ethan directly for the first time. "That is the difference, young man. A feeling is something that happens to you. A decision is something you make, and only one of them can be trusted to show up every morning." They sat in silence for a while, watching the light change over the water. Then Samuel spoke again, in the quiet, unhurried way of someone who knows that the most important things don't need to be rushed. "When I was young," he said, "I wanted to be someone great. I read about great men. I was inspired by great men. And every time I felt that inspiration, I thought, this is it. This is the fuel that will change everything." He shook his head slowly. "But inspiration is not fuel. Inspiration is a window. It shows you where you could go, but you still have to walk there yourself. And the walking has nothing to do with the window." He looked at the river. "Discipline is not about punishment. It is not about forcing yourself through pain because you think you deserve to suffer. Discipline is simply this: the decision to keep a promise to yourself, even when the feeling that made you make the promise is long gone. Especially then, because that moment, the moment when you don't feel like it, when every reasonable voice in your head is telling you to stop, that is the only moment that actually matters. Everything before that moment is just intention. What you do in that moment is character." Ethan felt something shift inside him. Not the electric surge of motivation he was so familiar with. Something quieter. Something that felt, strangely, more like grief. The grief of understanding. Too late. Why 3 years had been wasted. "I kept waiting to feel ready," he said quietly. "Everyone does," Samuel said, "and almost no one ever does. Because the feeling of readiness is a reward that comes after the work, not before it. You don't feel ready and then begin. You begin and then, slowly, you start to feel like someone who is capable of beginning. He pulled the net from the water, checked it, cast it again. "The river doesn't wait for me to feel passionate about fishing," he said. "The river is just the river, and I am just a man who made a promise 41 years ago." A long pause. "Keep your promises to yourself, Ethan. Not when you feel like it. Always." Ethan walked home in the growing morning light, and something was different. Not in the dramatic way of the videos, where the music swells and the hero strides forward into a new life. Something quieter than that. Something more like the shift you feel when a long-held tension finally releases. Not exciting, just true. He did not make a new plan that day. He did not write anything in a notebook. He simply decided, in the plain ordinary language of a real decision, rather than a feeling, that he would do one small thing, just one. And he would do it the next day as well. And the day after that. He did not do it because he felt inspired. He did it because Samuel had shown him that the river didn't care about his feelings, and neither did time, and neither, in the end, did the life he wanted to build. Weeks passed. Then months. Then something strange and beautiful began to happen. Not overnight, not in a flash of visible transformation, but slowly, the way light changes in a room when you haven't been watching. And then you look up and realize it is completely different from what it was. Ethan began to trust himself. Not because he had done something extraordinary, but because he had done something ordinary every single day and kept his promise to himself. When it was hard and when it was cold and when every part of him wanted to stop. And that, he understood at last, was the only foundation anything real is ever built on. Years later, when people ask Ethan what had changed him, he never mentioned the videos. He never mentioned the books, or the quotes, or the plans in the notebooks. He told them about a cold morning by a river, about an old man with weathered hands and clear eyes, about a net cast across gray water with the absolute unhurried confidence of someone who had made a promise and kept it for 41 years. "Motivation will visit you sometimes," he would say. "Welcome it when it comes. But don't build your life around a guest. Build it around a decision. Make the decision. Honor the decision. Every day, especially on the days you don't want to. That is the only secret there is.